Hi everyone, my name is Udit and today I'm going to be talking about the Visa Product Manager interview process. At the end of this video, you should have a clear understanding of what the process looks like, what interviewers are filtering for in each of the rounds, and a couple of tips on how to prepare for the rounds that I'm going to be telling you about. At the end of this video, I'm going to briefly talk about one PM-specific interview question that 90% of all candidates who interviewed at Visa have reported being asked. Quick introduction, I'm from Prepfully. On Prepfully, you can practice for free with other candidates. You can also get specific targeted feedback from Visa product managers who've been coaching and guiding candidates. And you can also get your resume reviewed by a recruiter who hires product managers at Visa. So in that context, this video has been put together with the help of the same Visa PMs who've been guiding and mentoring candidates on Prepfully. Right then, on to the interview process. In a nutshell, there are between 3 and 6 stages to the Visa Product Manager interview process. The first is the recruiter screen. The second to 6th interviews are a progression of interviews that assess your skills. The second interview is usually going to be with the hiring manager, and the 3rd through 6th interviews are going to be either with other product managers or stakeholders that you might work with day to day within your team. Let's talk briefly about the first round then, the recruiter phone screen as it's known. It's typically about 20 to 25 minutes round, and the goal is to basically assess your high level experiential and cultural fit with Visa's requirements of a product manager. I have 5 quick tips for this round. The first is to be super familiar with your past work. Make sure that you have a project that you can talk about for each of the roles you've held in the past. Second, make sure that you organize your thoughts in advance around what your contribution was, as well as the skills you might have gained in the process of doing the jobs that you did. Third, keep your answers short and crisp. This is a pretty short round. Fourth, have a clear reason for why you're applying to Visa and how it fits into your long-term career goals. Fifth, this round is nearly always going to start with tell me about yourself as the interview question. So make sure that you're ready to talk through that answer briefly and concisely, but giving the recruiter enough room to say, okay, tell me more about X, for instance. Next then are the craft rounds. These are going to be typically organized for 30 minutes each, but they have a habit of overrunning. So block off an hour for each of these interviews. Each interview can cover multiple types of interview questions, but there are broadly 4 buckets of questions which come up. 5 if you're interviewing for a technical product manager role. And these 4 to 5 buckets are firstly craft experience, like have you done the role before? Second, Visa specific knowledge, like do you know about the company and how it works? Third, behavioral and leadership questions, like can you work with others and can you drive influence? Fourth, case study questions, like can you solve an abstract theoretical problem that you might be facing? And fifth, last but not the least, but which only comes up if you're interviewing for a technical PM role, are technical questions. So what I'm going to do is to briefly deep dive into what the sort of questions are that come up, what your interviewer is looking for in each of these buckets, as well as some tips for preparing for them. For craft experience, your interviewer wants to evaluate your past experience as a PM and its relevance to the role. So make sure you practice your stories and can demonstrate not just your competence as a PM, as well as in your PM skills, but also the ability to introspect and learn from that experience. You should show ongoing development, and there should be a narrative of improvement as a product manager where you can show you can learn from your past experiences and keep on becoming better. Our default recommendation for this round is to just practice. Ultimately, there's no replacement for that. Practice with friends, practice just with yourself, record yourself, speak out your answers in front of a mirror. If you want specific advice on what you're doing well, but what you might not be doing well enough, you can also speak to an interview coach. There are lots of these from Visa who are product managers themselves on Prepfully, and they've coached a lot of candidates. So they have an idea of what Visa is looking for. They also know where the gaps might be. So they can give you very targeted feedback on where you need to improve your stories. The second bucket I referred to was Visa specific questions. So your interviewers here want to be reassured that you know how Visa as a business works and that you can effectively drive value there. So not just how Visa works, but also how your skills could be applied in the context of it working in the whole payments and fintech ecosystem, what the opportunities might be and how it could grow, but also where you could add value within that framing. Behavioral questions are all about assessing your cultural fit for Visa. These usually take 2 shapes or forms. The first is tell me about a time when X happened, where they're looking to see if you have that depth of experience that comes with having worked a while and having faced a diverse array of situations in the workplace. The second type of question is how would you do something if XYZ were to happen. And these are all about, can you take that knowledge that you've gained from your past experiences where you might have succeeded, you might not have, but in all scenarios, you should ideally have retrospected. And can you apply it to a theoretical situation that you might face at Visa? Like, the first format could be, tell me about a time where you've had a difficult team member to work with, or where you had to convince leadership of something that they didn't want to buy into. How would you could take the shape or form of how would you deal with the situation where you're running short of budget, or how would you deal with a new regulatory requirement that you weren't prepared for in your product roadmap, but which is causing major strategic projects to get deprioritized. How would you communicate this? Who would you involve? How would you convince your team to pivot focus? So it can go into a lot of tangents, as you can see, but the goal is, can you talk through how you would as a PM handle these situations on a day-to-day basis? Our tip for this round is generally to be super aware of what Visa's latest set of values are and weave them into your answers, because this is a default and automatic way of aligning your answers with what your interviewers are supposed to care about, because they're filtering for exactly these characteristics and exactly these values through these sorts of questions. And I'm not suggesting to force these values into your answers. That's just going to come off as artificial and strained. My recommendation would be, like, if you do something that organically demonstrates a value, then frame it in the way, and don't repeat the value's words necessarily, but frame it in a way that makes it obvious that, hey, this is your way of working. And that's ultimately how your interviewer is likely going to also be working. So they'll gel with that answer. And it's a good way to demonstrate a fit, a behavioral and cultural fit with the team and the company. Case study questions then are much, much rarer, but they definitely do come up. They often come up in more senior roles. A candidate recently reported being asked, hey, how would you expand a credit card service to a new country? So that's the shape or form these questions can sometimes take. It's really important here to have a structured approach and not just shoot from the hip with the first idea you have. You want to show that you can be methodical with a question like this and break it down into all the way from, hey, what is the goal of this, to how could we, what does the market landscape look like? How could we then approach it, and then prioritize between different solutions to one that you feel is viable, but also show that you have the skills to follow through with all these steps if necessary. Finally, for technical interviews, these are, of course, going to come up primarily if you're interviewing for a technical product manager role. The goal is not just to demonstrate that you can be technical, but also that you can articulate technical concepts and, for instance, hold your own in a discussion with engineers where you can guide the narrative and guide the discussion into a constructive outcome where potentially there might not be a lot of clarity with regards to what the right solution might be, or what the right tech stack might be, or whether we should be using a NoSQL database versus a SQL. Again, the goal here is to make sure that you can participate in these discussions in a constructive way and guide others who might not have your business acumen into a discussion that makes sense for the business ultimately. So the shape or format of these could take, like, if you are, for instance, the PM of an API team, you could get questions like, how would you evaluate the success of an API, or what are some of the pitfalls you take into account? Or if you're the PM, for instance, of a caching team, how would you build a cache from scratch? What data would you put in there? What would you not put in there? How would you decide when to optimize this cache, and what could be some methods you would leverage? So generally, they're looking for a pretty deep understanding of the technicals that you'll be working on a day-to-day basis. Right then, that's all for this guide. 3 to 6 interview rounds for the Visa product manager interview process. If you have questions on any of the buckets of questions that I've covered, or nuances you want me to delve deeper into, then just leave a comment and I can try to go through that as well. Before I wrap up this video, I promise to share this interview question that a really large number of candidates have been reported getting asked in Visa product manager interviews. I really hope a consequence of this video isn't that Visa stops asking this question, because it actually makes a lot of sense and it's something that I would expect candidates to be able to articulate effectively. And this interview question is, how would you explain Visa's business model? And what it's effectively testing is, A, did you invest the time and effort necessary to understand it? Because it's not the most intuitive business model. Visa makes money across a range of revenue streams, and they want to see if candidates know this. B, this knowledge is going to be crucial when it comes to succeeding at a job, at this job anyway, right? So they want to see if you've actually taken that into account and factored that into your decisions. And thirdly, they're testing your communication skills here. So can you articulate what is a complicated business line in really simple words to someone else? Can you do it concisely? Can you do it effectively? Do you get the message across? And how do you respond to further questioning on that line? Finally, for brownie points, what I would recommend is for each of these revenue streams, try to think of how they could become bigger, how you could like 2x or 3x them. They don't have to be the most pragmatic ideas, but the fact that you've invested thought into thinking how they could be made bigger and how you could potentially contribute to that is definitely going to win you a lot of brownie points, because, well, let's face it, the vast majority of PMs are not going to be thinking about that when preparing for their interviews at Visa. Good. Then that's all from us. Once you feel ready for some real world practice with a Visa product manager interview, you can book a mock with Visa PM on Prepfully. If you're just looking for advice around how to begin preparation or whether you are ready for that interview, you can also book an advice session. The same coaches who help guide this particular video are the ones you're going to be talking to. I'm also going to link to a bunch of useful resources down in the description below. So a good example is some answers to the question, what is Visa's business model? But also a written guide we've got on this topic. We've got an interview question bank for lots of other questions that have been asked recently at Visa. We've also got a couple of blog posts that delve deeper into specific questions asked of PMs. So feel free to check those out. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful. If you did, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, because you're going to keep publishing content like this. And apart from that, good luck and best of luck for your interviews.
Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. Our website is prepfully.com. We've got lots of interview questions there. You can also schedule a mock interview with one of our experts. You can find the link in the description below. All the best from us at Prepfully, and we hope you totally rock your interview.